Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Georgia DNR's Lunch and Learn webinar. I'm Emily Wingo of the Georgia Department of Natural Resources Floodplain Unit. First, a little housekeeping. We are in listen-only mode, so please make sure your mic is muted. If you're having any Wi-Fi issues, you may want to turn off your camera and any other programs you may have running. Please make note of the chat feature on your screen. Please use the chat for communication, as we will not be taking questions by audio. Isabel Rogers of Dewberry is monitoring the chat and will try to help you with any technical matters. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credit for CFMs. To receive the credit, you must be logged in separately, answer all poll questions during the session, and provide your name and email at the end of the presentation. Please use the radio buttons to respond to the poll questions either in the pop-up window or the chat box. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. Also, a survey link will be provided at the end of the presentation. We appreciate you completing the survey so we may improve these webinars in the future. We are recording today's webinar and plan to post the video to georgiadfirm.com. All right, with that, let's get started. Today's presentation is A Common Ground, Building Georgia's Basemap Together. Our presenter is Susan Miller with the Georgia Geospatial Office. Susan serves as the Georgia's Geospatial Information Officer, leading statewide efforts to advance the use of geospatial science and analytics in public policy and decision-making. She collaborates with state agencies, local governments, regional commissions, and the private sector to strengthen Georgia's geospatial ecosystem and expand access to critical data and resources for all Georgians. She's here today to share the work her office is leading to support Georgia's geospatial community, both by expanding available resources and recognizing the vital role many of you play as stewards to the state's hydrography data. We see this as an opportunity to strengthen the connections that make our data and our state stronger. And with that, I'll now turn it over to Susan.
Thank you so much, Emily. And it's really great to be here, especially with my friends in person today. I love it. But hello to everybody who's online as well. So I wanted to just start by telling you a little about me so you kind of know who I am and don't think I'm some random schmo talking to you today. I want to give a little bit on my background. My education is in conservation biology. That's where I was first exposed to GIS, and it was amazing to me. It was the moment when I like to kind of say that I felt like data was in data jail when it was locked up in rows and columns in a database, and then all of a sudden it came to life, and I've never looked back. So conservation biology, and then I do have a master's in geospatial sciences. So I have loved it since the moment I was exposed to it. Unfortunately, I don't get to do much of it anymore, which I miss very much. So it's fun to especially be in the room with you guys today. I started my career being a GIS manager for a watershed along the Mississippi River up in Minnesota, and got to work with all kinds of state and federal agencies. So kind of share a common background with many of you. And then I went to Esri, where I was a product engineer and a release manager for the ArcGIS suite. And then from there, I went to the Nature Conservancy, where I ran their global GIS program, which was wonderful and amazing. I loved it so much. And so kind of built a global network of GIS. It was fun. So that's a little bit about me. And now I want to tell you what I want to talk about today. So I'm going to give you the world's briefest history on statewide GIS in Georgia. And the only reason I want to do that is so you know where we were, where we are, and kind of where we need to go, because it's important to the story. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about our office and just kind of the mom and apple pie statements about our office, and then really kind of move into a lot of our major initiatives, and particularly into the data programs. And so that's the goal today. Okay. So first we'll go into that brief history, which again, I'm only concerned about from the perspective of letting you know that unfortunately we're really far behind. So I just want to be pretty open and honest about that. You all probably know more than most that Georgia used to be a real leader in the geospatial space, especially in regards to remote sensing and remotely sensed data. You know that ERDOS, well, hopefully you know that ERDOS started here, which is amazing. And we have a long history of remotely sensed sciences here in Georgia. So we used to be the world's leader. We were the state that had the very first data clearinghouse as a concept and then in practice. And unfortunately, our data clearinghouse has never ever been touched since. So I'll talk a little bit about that today and our efforts to jump into this century with that. The state was very passionate about what they were doing back in the 70s and 80s, but quickly funding was taken away from any kind of statewide perspective on looking at data or caring about data from a statewide perspective. And so things have been on life support since then. So geospatial professionals across the state, in any level of government, local government and state government, have done what they needed to do, and they've done a great job of it, but unfortunately they've been in a silo working all alone, right? And so there are consequences to that, and we'll talk about those in a minute. And then starting in about 2013 and moving forward into 2017, the state, a lot of people around the state said, this is ridiculous. We are spinning our wheels and we're doing things in a way that isn't productive. Let's create a geospatial information office. And a whole bunch of studies were done. Should we have it? How should it be set up? Da, 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 da. And still it didn't come to fruition. It was actually the regional commissions. So for anybody who doesn't know, the state is broken up into 12 regional commissions. And they were the ones that said, hey, let's put our money where our mouth is, and let's try to fund having a person who would run a geospatial information office. And they applied for and won a grant from the federal government at a 50% match from the Economic Development Administration. And they were able to hire someone, and they ended up hiring me. And so they were the ones that really, gave rise to us having a geospatial information office here in the state. So really want to say thank you to them, as well as to the Department of Community Affairs. That's where I physically sit. That's where I'm housed. And the Department of Community Affairs is an interesting organization. I call it the Island of Misfit Toys in a good way, because it runs about 75 programs for the state. So programs that aren't big enough to be in the DNR. They need a home too, right? So DCA runs everything from the housing program for the state to environmental programs. So we all find a home there together and really enjoy that. Okay, so, and then I'm going to talk to you about activities that have happened between 2017 and 2025. Now, I said there are consequences of us being very, very stalled out for decades, right? This is a map representing the geospatial maturity of all of the states in the US. And unfortunately, Georgia was absolute last in 2021, that upper right-hand corner. We were dead last in the nation. We are now second to dead last. Alaska is the only state that is behind us. And they aren't, I didn't put them on the map because the map got too big. But in 2023, we moved up from a D+ to a C. And this is really, this is our gauge for understanding the geospatial maturity of both our data programs and then any initiatives that we have in the state. And I'm not going to go into the details of how this is created, but it's a good litmus test. The goalposts kind of change on the geospatial maturity assessment because we have advances in the world. And you all probably are very hyper aware of the hydrologic modeling component of that and 3D HP. And so, for example, states were graded on their hydrologic programs for a long time, but when 3D HP came on the scene, we kind of said, the folks that do the GMA said, let's not grade this for a little bit. Let's give people time to move forward and move into 3D HP. So consequences. So we are moving very, very hard in the direction of improving our geospatial maturity grade and actually bringing to bear data programs and data resources for the state. And I would like to introduce you to the totality of the geospatial information program. It's myself and two amazing, amazing colleagues, Natalie Lee, who is the deputy GIO for the state, and then Megan Haley, who is brand new to the team. And she's running our brand new imagery program for the state, which I'll talk about later. However, we do not do all that we do with just the three of us. We have very strong partnerships with all kinds of groups, including the private sector and including Dewberry. We recently hired Dewberry to run our managed services for our enterprise ecosystem, and we have been in love with that process ever since it started. I think we're about maybe 3 or 4 months into it, so we're really excited about that. And we work with a lot of other vendors. We believe in, having best of breed and having the resources to do what we need to do. Okay, so here's some of those mom and apple pie statements about the Geospatial Information Office. I'm not going to read you our mission and vision statement, but effectively, we're here to make government more effective and efficient. And we all know that that is very easy to do through the use of GIS, right? And it really is that language that brings all kinds of disparate information together, right, to form knowledge. I think something that's really important to stress about us is that we do have these guiding principles. We not only want to make resources available to the geospatial community, but we want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to understand how to use those resources. So education and training is a really big component of what we want and are doing with all of our programs. Okay, so how do we do that? We focus all of our work in these 5 major areas. And I'm going to give you some examples with inside each of these areas. These are our overarching goals. And we're going to start with the top one, which is leading and enabling facilitated collaboration. And I want to give 3 examples of the types of work that we're doing in that space. The first one, I hope, will be one of the most important things that we do, which is we created the Geospatial Advisory Council for the state. And I'm going to go into a little bit more detail on that in the next couple of slides. But basically, this is a body of people that we hope will convince the state that they need to care about and fund geospatial data and resources across the state at a state scale. Right, we're a home rule state, which means our cities and our counties have, a stronger pull than the state does, right? And people tend to scoff at the state. But when it comes to data, that's kind of ridiculous, right? Because a hurricane and a flood doesn't care about city and county boundaries, right? So why are we managing the data that help facilitate those kinds of things or recovery from those kinds of things in such a way? So anyway, I'm going to go into a little bit more on that. So the second one is, I mentioned the regional commissions earlier, and those regional commissions need to play a really key role as geospatial service providers for local governments in Georgia who don't have capacity. So anyone who's on the phone today who doesn't have strong geospatial capacity within inside their own organization, well, if you're a government entity, you can always turn to your regional commissions to get help with geospatial activities. And so I've been working really closely with them for a number of years to set them up as both a supporter for their local governments, as well as then setting them up to do statewide activities, right? So we have a great project going on with the Department of Transportation right now, where the regional commissions are actually validating and improving on the data that GDOT has for roads, right? So we want to see that continue, that kind of activity. And then the Georgia Data Hub. So we want to migrate away from the old clearinghouse. And so we have built the ecosystem for that to happen, and Dewberry helps us manage that. So we're really thrilled about that. I've got QR codes that you can go peruse those things, but we do have a modern Esri-based data hub, and we want to be populating that with all kinds of information and data. And one of the things that I hope that will come of creating stronger ties with your community is that we can get hydrologic data on there and bring that to bear for the state. So just really quickly, I want to give you a little more information about the Geospatial Advisory Council. This is its current membership, and the intent here is that it be made up of leaders in the state who can influence change. There's a lot of really wonderful people on the council right now, and a couple that I want to draw your attention to, one of whom is our president, or our chair, excuse me. We have the Association of Cities and the Association of Counties. And again, we talked about home rule state. We care very much about our cities and our counties, and both organizations that represent all of Georgia's cities and counties. Both of their executive directors sit on this council. Yeah, so just to kind of help you understand that there are so many people who understand the power of geospatial sciences and what that can bring to decision making, and how much more effective and efficient it can make all of us, both in the public and private sector. They believe in it. Everybody on this council very much believes on it. We don't have GIS professionals on this council, but the intent is that we will be creating a lot of working groups. And that is where the powerhouse GIS folks will be, right? And then they will be the advisors to the advisory council to help them understand what the needs are and then prioritize those. The council is 1 year old. It spent its first year developing its strategic plan. Its vision is to foster a vibrant geospatial ecosystem for Georgia. I love that so much. And they have 3 major goals. And I won't go into the details of those, but I think they're incredibly solid goals. And their purpose is really to influence change and to increase adoption of geospatial sciences across the state. So very, very excited about those. Okay, so now we're going to go into our second goal, which is developing Georgia's Basemap. And I'm going to say a few things in here, and then I'm going to hold off on some of the data programs till the very end. But when I say Basemap, what am I talking about? I'm talking about a collection of data themes, and a data theme might have 1 data set in it, or it might have 1,000. So if you think of addresses, right, that's going to have, very basic number of data layers in it, right? But then you talk about something like transportation, and that's going to have hundreds. So these are the data themes, so the buckets, I often call them, because that's a technical term, right? These are the data themes that we consider to be part of the base map for the state. And once we tackle all of these, we'll move on to more and more and more and more, and we'll just continue to work on those. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about a base map. And every time I'm talking about it, I'm talking about statewide. So just always assume that I'm speaking about statewide. Here's kind of a snapshot of what the base map looks like today. So over on the left-hand column, you have all of those data themes. And then in the center, these are the ones where we in the GIO have started something. We may have started something incredibly tiny, or we may have a huge, robust program around it, but we are dabbling in those things. And then over on the right-hand side are the areas that we want to hit next. And you'll see that I have hydrography here highlighted, because I'm hoping that getting more tapped into y'all's community, that we'll be able to really bring all the wonderful stuff that you have and that the DNR has, and that everybody's working on collectively on this call, that we can bring that to bear for more people and really highlight it and share it. And everything that we do, I'm going to go back to the base map. Everything we do in partnership with somebody. It might be a private company, or it might be government entities. So certainly when we're talking about hydrography, that's all about partnering with state and local governments. And I'm actually going to go into that in a second, a little bit deeper. But the idea for us is, one of the drivers for us is that you build things once, you maintain them, and then you use them many ways. I can't tell you how much I see across the state of duplicative data development. And then my biggest pet peeve is people develop a data set for one thing. They need it for this one thing at this one moment, and then they walk away from it. It's just, it just boggles the mind. So everything we do, this is a guiding principle: build it once, use it many ways. And maintenance, I have discovered, is kind of like a 4-letter concept for a lot of people. And that's another thing that we really want to preach is maintenance, 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 and how much more effective you are when you maintain data rather than build it once, walk away from it for 3 years, go back, build it again. It's just, it's not wise. So the data for the Basemap comes from 2 sources. It either comes from government sources or comes from private sector sources. And so all we are is the orchestrator. We don't, we're not actually creating data, right? We're here to assemble Georgia's 537 cities, our 159 counties. So we're basically assembling data when it comes from a government source from about 700 local governments. That's not a small task. And so you'll see examples of it here, government sources, things like roads, addresses. Those are things where the authoritative data source is a local government. We would never, ever dream of taking that and trying to do that on our own. The idea is to use technology to go out and grab that data and keep it constantly up to date. But it belongs to the local government. It is theirs. We're just rolling it up at scale. And then examples of things that we would buy where it's not effective or efficient to do it at a smaller scale is something like LiDAR, right? Or ortho imagery. Okay, so I want to highlight a couple of things that are going to seem a little odd for this group, but we are not funded directly by the state for the work that we do. So we go out and we build partnerships so that we can do the work that we know needs to be done, right? And I want to highlight some really critical partners in that. And one of them is the Georgia Emergency Communications Authority, and that's the 911 authority for the state. And they are housed at GEMA, the Georgia Emergency Management Agency. Yeah, I said that right. So GECA, the Emergency Communications Authority, is one of our key funding partners. And I'm going to talk about why that is in a second, but they are the key funding partners for our address data program, our road centerline data program, and then also several of our administrative boundary programs. And then also want to highlight the Geospatial Advisory Council, which I just introduced you to, and in particular, 2 members of that, which are the Department of Transportation and the Atlanta Regional Commission. That's one of the 12 regional commissions for the state. They are the funding partners right now for our aerial imagery program that we're just launching. So they are just amazing, and we love working with them. Here I'm not advancing my slide. There we go. Okay, so you may think to yourself, why is she talking to me about 911? I'm going to give you a crash course on 911. So 911 was built way back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s across the United States, and it made a ton of sense, and it was super awesome and amazing. It has undergone very, very minor technology updates since then. And obviously, technology has changed tremendously over time. And there is a universal overhaul, not an upgrade, but a complete overhaul of 911 across the nation. And it's called Next Gen 911 or NG 911. And NG 911 is going to revolutionize the way people think about GIS data for certain data sets. It is the way they're going to do 911 now is completely different than the way they've done it in the past. And it's going to require a tremendous amount of work across the nation. But some of the really key factors are that it's going to be internet based, which is brand new for it. And that internet based activity is all going to be technical, right? And it's all going to rely on, you want to guess? GIS data. Where GIS data has been a nice to have thing for 911 to date. So it's like a little thing you put on the side. And now it's going to rely entirely on GIS data. So when I started working in NextGen, I just assumed that 911 knew where I was, right? They do not. They do not. If any of you have ever called 911, the very first question they ask you is, where are you? This is the very first question. And I remember being kind of like, what? You don't know where I am in this day and age? Well, now with NextGen, they're going to know exactly where you are. But the only way they're going to know exactly where you are is if the data that they're using to figure out where you are is good. Garbage in, garbage out. So the data sets that 911 requires are road center lines, address structure points, a lot of different boundaries like fire, EMS, law enforcement, all these things, because computers are going to be making decisions. Computers are going to be receiving a call from a cell phone, right? Because 90%, I think it's 80% of all 911 calls come in from a cell phone now. They're going to be receiving information, and then they're going to be making decisions about where to route that call and what resources, what fire department, what ambulance service, what law enforcement service is going to come support you. And so we have to build that data, right? And because Georgia's so far behind, we don't have those data sets. A lot of states have beautiful, gorgeous address programs and so on and so forth. We do not have that in Georgia. So we have some pretty rapid work to do. This is a snapshot from a few days ago of what our address and road centerline data looks like across the state from the perspective of, is it ready to support NextGen 911? And if we build data programs in the state to support NextGen 911, they will benefit everybody. This is the most strict set of standards to meet 911 requirements, and everybody else that has nothing to do with 911 will be able to use this data. And we have built standards to ensure ties to things like the Department of Transportation, or we want to ensure that we're meeting the needs of the DNR, right? So we want to make sure that all of our data is always available for any kind of business function, not just for something like NextGen 911. So I talk about NextGen 911 because I have that lens on, but it's an address program and it's a road centerline program, and it's for everybody. It's not just for one use, and that's really critical to understand. But what this does depict is how close is a city or a county to meeting the standards that are required for NextGen 911. The almost white areas, we don't know. We haven't received data from those communities. So we don't know if they have it and it's gorgeous, or they don't have it at all. And then the darker blue you get, the more ready your data is, right? So you have gorgeous, beautiful data that's ready to support NextGen 911. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I would love to take a moment to do a poll, if you could help facilitate that.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you guys two questions. The first question is going to be, what types of geospatial data do you work with now? And then immediately following this one, we're going to ask a second one, which is, and what data do you either want that you don't have, or if you have it, isn't adequate, doesn't meet your needs? So it's going to be the same list. And for anybody who can't see the question, if you're getting something that says that you don't have permission to see the poll, I ask you to please go look in the chat. You'll be able to get to the question in the chat.
Also, just to reiterate, if you want to receive 1 hour of CFM continuing education credit, please answer the question. And just like Susan said, if you're not seeing the poll pop up, just go check your chat. And we'll just give a few moments for everyone to answer the question.
And I put little descriptions in here in case any of these things aren't something that you know about. Like the word cadastral isn't a common word, but parcels hopefully is. That's all about land ownership. Government units can be anything from a city boundary data set to county, to voting districts, to school districts. And geodetic controls are all I assume a lot of you probably know about geodetic controls, but they are the magic that allows us to do the math, to take a 3D sphere and flatten it out in a computer and make it 2D, and then do math on it. So geodetic controls are really important, and we don't have a great program. We don't have any program in Georgia, so I'm sure that drives most of you batty.
Okay, it looks like I'll give another few seconds for this one, just in case anyone has a last minute answer. Okay, I haven't seen any more come. Oh, there's one more.
Excellent. And then tell me when we're allowed to go to the next one.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and close that last one. And then I will launch the second one now.
Perfect. Perfect. So now I want to know about what you're missing. So what data sets do you want that you don't currently have access to, and or which ones are inadequate? So which ones are too out of date, or they don't have the attributes that you want, or there's something insufficient about it. So if you love your imagery or you love your elevation, don't check it on this slide. Check it if you hate it.
Do you really want to answer?
Yes. Yes. We can't fix what we don't know is broken. And we know, for example, that there's problems with the state's elevation data, and we desperately want to refresh it. And we definitely want to refresh it at QL level 1. And we'd like to do it sooner rather than later. And so I need ammunition. So I need you to tell me that it's horrible.
It looks like so far, at least, most people have responded that elevation is what they're lacking most.
Love it.
And then after that is imagery, followed by structures and hydrography.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I will hopefully give you some good news and a present on one of those in just a few moments. So am I allowed to just keep going and leave that open? Okay, perfect. And I'm going to do that. Okay, we're going to jump into, I'm going to do our third and fourth bucket where we work all in one. So that is, and I'm actually going to do the fourth one first, which is one of our activities a couple of years back was to develop Georgia's data standards. And what we tackled first were the data sets that do support Next Gen 911, right? We needed to put standards in place for that so that we can have data interoperability. And again, Next Gen 911 is based on a network, an emergency service network, so that if I'm in a community and I am inundated with a flood, I want to go take care of my family and I don't want to sit at my 911 station and answer the phone, right? This will allow for those 911 calls to be distributed out to everybody around you so that you can focus on what you need to focus on and let somebody else take care of you, right? So we need that data to be very interoperable. So we have developed data standards for the state. And then we've also developed tools to allow local governments to participate in the data programs and to convert their data from its native format into the data standards for the state. The tool suite is called DIVA, which stands for Data Integration, Validation, and Aggregation. And I'm going to give you kind of a quick whirlwind tour of DIVA, but essentially, first off, this is free to all local governments. So anybody on the call who works for any kind of governmental entity or is a contractor working on behalf of a governmental entity, you have access to the DIVA tools. So basically, you input your data up here in step 1 into the system, and the system automatically checks about 150 validation rules against your data, and then spits back a report to you that says, here's where you're in violation of the state standard. You do your data mitigation on your own. The tool does not do the data mitigation, just really want to stress that. So it's an iterative process. So you go round and round. And then once your data is clean enough that it moves through the first gate, then we start comparing it to all your neighbors' data. So if you're a city, we compare it to the county data. If you're a county, we compare it to the counties around you, right? So your data has to be seamless across geopolitical boundaries. And as you can all imagine, yeah, exactly. Good luck with that. So we're using technology to help us identify where the problems are with that. And then once your data and your neighbor's data are good enough, then we aggregate that all together and we push that out to the state map. And then we start the whole cycle over again. So because data is changing every day, all day long. So that's a whirlwind tour of DIVA. And why do we do it this way? Why are we creating state level tools? Because it does not make sense for 700 local governments to have to do this on their own. We should build the tools and allow them to use it. You know, the DIVA tool back end is $100,000, right? A year. We can't ask local governments to do that. We should do that and then make it freely available to everybody. And there's a whole myriad of other reasons why we should do it this way. But hopefully that's enough, the cost alone. And then our last area of focus is on cultivating a successful office. This is really, really important. So interesting, my colors are very different up there. Nothing's red. So what we focus most of our energy on is trying to find funding. Unfortunately, we don't have the funding that we need to do the work that we need to do. And so we are constantly trying to find funding and funding partners. We are diligently working on expanding our public-private relationships and working with our vendor community, working with our other partners. We're pursuing codification. We need the GIO to be codified into state law, giving us certain authority so that we can do things like implement standards and things like that. We're constantly chasing grant opportunities. And then something that we struggle with, and I put it up here because we do struggle with it, and I think a lot of people do, is really finding that balance, right? That work-life balance, because we have an amazing team that is really passionate and wants to do so much. And we often overextend ourselves because there is so much to do. We are so behind. And so kind of striking that balance is really challenging and something that we want to put effort into. So in my remaining time with you, I want to go a little bit deeper into some of the data programs, and in the hopes that you'll either want to utilize the data programs or you'll want to participate in the data programs. So just as a reminder, these the little stack of data over there is what we consider our Basemap themes, and then the bigger ones are what we've actually dabbled in. And so now I'm going to go into the dabbling and kind of where we stand. I mentioned a little bit about the statewide address and road centerline programs. And as a reminder, this is the snapshot in time through the 911 lens. But again, we're building these programs for everybody to use for anything. So I'm hoping that addresses are going to be useful to you all in the work that you do every day. Road center lines, same thing. One of the things for any of you who are on this call today who are associated with a local government, it is imperative that your local government participate in and tell us about your data for addresses and road center lines. If you have gorgeous data, we need to know it. If you have horrific looking data, we need to know it. And if you have no data, we especially need to know it, because it's our job to tell the state what the state needs to invest in bringing this data up to par for Next Gen 911. So we cannot fix what we don't know about. So if local governments on the call today, if you are, I know that there's probably not many of you who are associated with creating addresses and road center lines, but certainly you probably know the people who are. Please go reach out to them, give them the QR code that I'll have on my last slide, and say, you better be putting your data in here, because otherwise the GIO can't fight for money for you. So really big message to everybody on the call. If we don't know that you need money and resources to get your data ready for Next Gen 911, we can't get it for you. I can't say I can absolutely get it for you, but it is supposedly our job to tell the state. So along those lines, and this is another present for hopefully for anybody on the call who doesn't have address data or road center line data, we have partnered with TomTom, who many of you probably know. They do a lot of navigation services. We've partnered with them and gotten a data infusion from them. That's what we call it, data infusion. We basically bought a snapshot in time of their address data and their road center line data for Georgia. And we are allowed to then share that with all of our local governments in order for our local governments to either use it as a baseline if they don't have something, they can use it as their baseline, or if they have data, they can do a comparison and say, oh, you know, we were missing this address, or they've cleaned up their address attributes, and we really want to, you know, use their data. So we have this one-time infusion. It's one time, no maintenance. Remember, I told you I hate people who don't do maintenance. Well, here I am not doing maintenance. And it's because it's expensive. We can't just keep buying data. Plus, local governments are the authoritative data source, so they really should be the ones who we should be telling TomTom what our data is, right? Or we should be telling the census what our data is, not the other way around. So this is a really, really valuable program, and we hope that people tap into it. And I'm not going to go into details on this at all, but I do want you to understand that when you take the data from TomTom, our hope is that you will use it as a resource, and that you'll improve upon it, and that you'll continually feed it back into DIVA. So it's just kind of a self-fulfilling system that will just get better, better, better over time. Okay, so now I want to talk about the imagery program. This is a brand new thing that is literally about 2.5 weeks old. But before I ramble on about it, I want to level set on a few things. One is I'm going to be talking today about a statewide data program, but it's about commercial off-the-shelf imagery. This means that somebody flew the imagery for some other purpose other than for me, and we're buying it because they already have it for pennies on the dollar. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So that means we have zero control over anything about the imagery for the most part, right? So that's why it's pennies on the dollar. There is, I want to tell you who gets access to this because we are buying it. This isn't something we created, which means that there are license terms around it. So for my friends in the room at Dewberry, you actually do get access to this because you are under contract working for a governmental entity in Georgia. But for those on the phone, the people who get access to this imagery are any governmental entity in the state. So we always negotiate our contracts on behalf of every governmental entity, not just on our behalf. So any government can use this, and any contractor working on your behalf, and any federal partner working on your behalf. So if you're working with USGS or NRCS, you can use this imagery as well. And so this is also available to all of our Dewberry colleagues. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the detail in a second about the time frame, but it's basically a 3-year program for right now. We're hoping to secure long-term funding for this so that it's just constant all the time. And this is just a snapshot real quick of the kinds of people that are using. We had a pilot project for an imagery program, and we were using imagery from Google. So any of you who have used the Google GIO imagery, you were using our pilot imagery. Okay, so what comes in this brand new program? You get 6-inch imagery. You get all 4 bands. So you do get color, infrared, in addition to the RGB, and then also something called the Gray Sky program. And Gray Sky program is imagery taken post any significant size disaster. So the vendor that we work with has a contract with insurance companies, and they're trying to prevent insurance fraud and also trying to streamline the insurance claims process. And they can do that much better if they have post-disaster imagery. So this company gets up in the air immediately post-disaster as soon as it's safe to fly and takes imagery. And so we're going to get access to that for Georgia. So here are some examples of the RGB and the, oh, hello. Okay. Of the RGB imagery and the color infrared of the Augusta National Area pre and post Helene. Okay, so in addition to the basic stuff that we're going to provide, which again is the color and the infrared, and then that Gray Sky program, local governments and state agencies can do buy-ups. They can buy 3-inch imagery, they can buy obliques, they can buy derivative products, they can buy additional services. These all cost money. This is not coming, the GIO is not covering this piece. But I do want to let you know that our contract does allow for folks to buy off of it. So it is an existing contract. You wouldn't, you don't need to go through the rigmarole of procurement and things like that. So here's just an example of oblique for anybody who doesn't know it. Basically, you're taking pictures of something from the sides as opposed to straight up and down. And then here's an example of a cost buy-up. So for all of these counties, which is the Atlanta Regional Commission, if they wanted to buy up to 3-inch imagery, it would cost them about $120,000 a year, so $360,000, and they would have access to imagery that was flown twice a year at 3-inch. And then here's just some use cases for how we know that the imagery will be used. Tax assessors are really flipping out about it because they can do change detection from year to year and see where people might have been doing unpermitted work and generate a little more tax income. And then all the way to the Gray Sky program, where the DOT is going to be able to use it to see where flood inundation is happening, and then they can know where to close roads and things like that. I'm very hopeful that it will be used in hazard mitigation planning to validate the models that are out there with real world data, to take in the real world data and then look at what the predictions were and then improve on the model. I haven't found anybody who wants to bite that off with me yet, but I'm hoping for it. And then our intent, like I said, is to, over the 3-year period, to really help the state understand why they should fund this permanently. Right now, our funding is coming from the Department of Transportation and the Atlanta Regional Commission, for whom we are so incredibly grateful. And we intend to do an ROI study on this, and a recent one done in Indiana showed a 34-to-1 ROI, which is really impressive. We don't think we'll get that high simply because in Georgia, people do without. The majority of Georgia's cities and counties don't have access to imagery. If they do, the best they have is the 1-meter resolution from M.A.P, right? And that's it. So they've got leaf-on imagery, and it's a very coarse scale. So our ROI will not probably be as impressive because people haven't yet drunk the Kool-Aid of using imagery. I did forget to mention that in year 2 and 3 of our 3-year contract, we will be refreshing half the state, the northern half of the state, this coming leaf off season. And then the next leaf off season, we'll do the southern part of the state. So we will have a full leaf off collect for the entire state. So while it is a commercial off the shelf product, we have negotiated terms so that we will get leaf off. So we're very, very thrilled about that. LiDAR, this is something that I assume most everybody on the call already knows a lot about. And just to be upfront, we know that there are major issues with the LiDAR that's available for the state right now, and it is our hope and goal to refresh it. Some people don't know what LiDAR is. Like I said, I assume most of you do, but for anybody who doesn't, it's kind of like taking an MRI or CAT scan of the Earth's surface. And here's just a little imagery to kind of help you. So you look at an image and then you do LiDAR over it. It's basically taking pictures of the Earth's surface with a laser, and it gives you very detailed elevation data. You can also derive a ton of other amazing stuff from it that's incredibly valuable, particularly to the engineering community and the survey community. And this is a Dewberry study that was done in 2011, and it was redone very recently. And I really want to get some help figuring out how to update my slides. So I am sitting in Dewberry's office. But basically what this does is it tells you the top 10 uses of LiDAR in the state of Georgia and what benefit we would receive if we were to build and maintain a LiDAR data set for the state. So in other words, the state could save $8.5 million annually if we were to build and maintain this. Now y'all have redone this and the number is higher, but because I can't read the like 60,000 page report that was done for this, I haven't yet done a good job of pulling out all the numbers. Hint, nudge, nudge. So, but this, I mean, this is amazing to know this and to be able to use this to tell the story to the state leadership about, look, you know, and this also benefits private and public sector. So that's amazing. So our next hopeful goals are to move into a parcel program for the state. Parcels are just so important. We're really eager to do that. And I want to move into the third poll question. And this is all about what are your biggest barriers in your day-to-day jobs of using geospatial data more effectively. So we talked earlier about what data you have access to, what data you don't have access to, or you do, but it's so poor, like your elevation data. Now I want to know what some of the major blockers are. And as a reminder, anybody who doesn't see it in the on the screen, please go over into your chat. And I will let you know while you're filling that out that for LiDAR, we have applied for multiple grants. Unfortunately, we haven't been successful at those, but we are applying for grant funding to be able to do QL level 1 LiDAR for the state. And we currently have a request to the federal government through congressionally discretionary spending dollars to pay for a third of the state, pay for half of a third of the state, which we would then use and go to the USGS and ask for the other half through the 3D program, the 3D Elevation for the Nation program. I can't guarantee that we'll get that, but I just wanted to let you know that we are trying, and it would be QL level 1, and we would partner with the USGS through the 3D program for whenever we do get that funding available. How are we looking on the poll?
We're looking good. So it looks like most people have either said no major barriers.
Excellent.
That is tied with budget or licensing constraints. And that is followed by don't know what's available and limited GIS staff.
Excellent. Okay. I'm surprised that that makes my heart sing that there no major barriers is up high. That's really amazing. I wish I could say that. Okay, well, I believe that that concludes my talk. I've put some QR codes up here, both for the address, just 911 data programs in general, but then also that data infusion for addresses and road center lines, and also the imagery program. So I'm hoping that y'all will use the imagery program, and that you'll encourage your cities and your counties, for any of those of you on the call who are in cities and counties, to become part of the address and road center line programs. And with that, I don't know if we have some time for questions.
Just, we do have one quick question.
Sure.
What partner are you using for post-disaster imagery?
It's a company called Vexel. And they run a program for a consortium of insurance companies in the United States. I think they actually have expanded outside the United States, but insurance companies used to go fly on their own, and they all did it individually. And you can imagine how not effective that was at saving money. So they got together and got smart and said, why don't we stop doing this individually and just pull money and do it all together. And so the company that flies for that program is Vexel, Vexel.
Great. Thank you so much, Susan, for that very informative webinar. I hope everyone has enjoyed the presentation as much as I have. We will keep the chat open for a few more minutes so you can submit questions, but please be sure to include your email address so that we can follow up with you on your question. Please mark September 10th from 12 to 1 on your calendar for the next Lunch and Learn webinar. Please make note of the registration link for the webinar and survey link in the chat and on the screen. Again, we appreciate you completing the survey so that we may improve these webinars. We are offering 1 hour of continuing education credit for today's session, available to CFMs who have completed the poll questions and provide their name and email in the chat now. A copy of the presentation will be emailed to all attendees. If you're requesting continuing education credits, the certificates will be emailed separately. What's more, our next Lunch and Learn is scheduled for September 10th, so be on the lookout. And with that, thank you again for attending today, and thank you, Susan, so much. I learned a lot today. I appreciate it. For those who don't have any other questions, this does end our Lunch and Learn webinar. Have a great day, everybody.
Question on the line of somebody pointed out that their county's addressing and road center line data is actually in pretty good shape, and wanted to know how do they get that data to you?
Excellent. I'm going to put a QR code up, and then you're going to go to that QR code. I'm going to put, okay, on the far left, it says 911 data programs. If whoever asked that question could take a photo of that, and I can also go get it online. You'll go in there, you'll send that link to your team in your city or your county, and they can register to join the program, and they'll get credentials, and then they can sign into the program and upload their data, and we will be eternally grateful. I will go get that link so I can actually put it in there as well. Are there any other questions in the chat?
Wait, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, I
Oh,
didn't put it in
yeah.
the chat. or not.
No.
I put it in the chat, but
Bring it. Bring it.
I was wondering why the other regional commissions don't provide funding if this is a statewide initiative, as the GIO is trying to better the whole state. Like, why isn't the other ones involved as much as I would think?
That's an excellent question. And it's not that they aren't involved, it's that the Department of Transportation and the Atlanta Regional Commission, they got smart several years back and created a joint data purchasing committee, because they both work on transportation planning. And they were duplicating efforts, and they got really smart and said, oh, let's stop doing that. So they created this joint purchasing committee, and we went to that joint purchasing committee to ask for funding. And so it wasn't that we, the rest of the regional commissions didn't get the opportunity to participate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does.
So it wasn't that they said no, it was that
This is where you fit.
that's where we, that's
Yeah.
where we went. I think given the choice, they would. However, it is our goal to go straight to the state and the legislature and say, this is for the good of all. Please stop having us go out and beg, borrow, and steal money. Let's fund this from the state perspective. It's a wise investment. And I think we'll be able to show that really easily. Because I think having the imagery program, I would say about 85 to 90% of the states, local governments can't afford imagery, right?
Right.
And so the ones who can, they'll probably still keep doing their custom flights, and that's great. They may find that they can do it every other year as opposed to every year because they can augment it with this or something, but there's going to be a savings for them. And then the folks who've never had the imagery, they're going to be able to improve on efficiencies. Like one example that comes to mind is just being able to do what was field work, doing it heads up in the office, right? That's going to save hours of work. And so we're going to be able to show that through our ROI study. That was a tongue twister. So yeah, that's our hope. Because we don't want to have to go. It took us many years to find the funding for this. So we don't want to have to keep doing that.
Is there a state-driven initiative for communities to be able to purchase licenses for GIS or purchase GIS? I feel like at one point there was some sort of initiative where.
So are you talking specifically about the software? Yeah, so what we have in place right now, which we would love to expand, is we have a master purchasing agreement with Esri that's run by the state. And so local governments can get a 15% discount off of that. That's, not great, but it's also the best we could do. Yeah. Esri has a pretty strict rule about they want the federal government to have the best deal that they have with discounts, and that's a 17% discount. So we got them pretty close. I don't know. I don't make the rules. But what I would love to do, but this unfortunately is only really for state agencies, is I'd love to have a master license agreement with Esri for all state agencies. Right now, the ones who have it are buying piecemeal. A couple of them have their own enterprise license agreements. But most people are buying piecemeal, and so they don't get access to unlimited licensing. They don't get access to tools they haven't used so that they can play with them. And so I'd love to do an ELA for the state. But generally that would be for state agencies. We during COVID, we hit the point where an ELA made financial sense for the state. Before, we just weren't paying, we weren't using that much. But then when COVID happened, we had an explosion of GIS and state agencies because they should have been using it already, in my humble opinion, but they finally got on board with COVID. They understood the power that it could bring to decision making. And so we hit a threshold at that point where it makes sense financially. So we just need to convince the state of that.
Well, great.
answer your
Thank you
question?
so
Yeah.
much, everybody. Just want to let everybody on the line know if you need to log out, and while Susan and the team there in the conference room continue the conversation, that's great. We appreciate it, and see you in 2 months.